All right, we are live again on the Plurilock LinkedIn channel. Welcome to the 12 Days of Cyber Christmas. James Phillips, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, James. I was going to ask how to pronounce your name beforehand, but because I just always do that. But it's fairly self-explanatory, I feel like. And James, you're joining me from Ottawa. How's the morning looking in Ottawa? What's it like? It seems probably it's more festive than the West Coast, even though I do have my Santa hat on, which is I think bringing the levels up pretty good.
Yes, winter is here. We had an ice storm 2 days ago, and now we've got some light flurries today, which is now just covering that ice, so it's making it extra treacherous.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like chaos.
Yeah.
That's the Canadian winter that people hear about. Don't get too much of that here in Victoria. But yeah, thanks for joining the show as always. Why don't you just give the people who maybe don't know you or don't know your company a little bit of a background on yourself, quickly, and your company, MI613.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So, I've got just over 20 years experience in the industry, coming right out of school into the military and then working my way through different roles and all the way through the big accounting companies, KPMG, PwC. And with that, we started this company about 4 years ago, and we saw a need in the industry where we could provide some higher level services. Throughout the my time, I've developed some skills and incident response and forensics and network forensics. And we saw a real need where I could kind of parachute in, help companies with very specific needs, get them through incidents, and then move on. So we're very short in duration what we do.
Right. Very specified. Like
Mhm.
James Bond might parachute into a situation and help out there. No, I love the branding and the roles. What you guys do, incident response, super interesting field. Yeah. How was the 2021 year? I guess we've never chatted before. So how was the last couple years during the pandemic as far as business goes for you guys, and how did it change what you guys were doing?
It's been a very busy couple of years. Actually, we've been seeing it get busier and busier, and we've seen attacks evolve. They've been changing. One of the things about when the pandemic first happened is, I don't want to say it made it easier because there's nothing easy about what we do, but certainly when a lot of travel and corporate travel was restricted, it certainly opened up an opportunity for a lot more granular alerting. So now we knew that our people were not traveling. So it was very
Right.
easy to set up some conditional authentication, conditional access rules to see where authentications were coming from. So from that point of view, it gave us a lot more clear look into the picture of where authentications were coming from. So that was a little bit different. But we've definitely seen attacks evolve. We've seen them become more sophisticated, but we've also seen attacks become more disorganized. Certainly in the earlier days, ransomware was very organized, and there were definite groups behind the attacks. But now we're seeing a lot more of a Wild West sort of feel out there with ransomware as a service, and it seems like there's a lot more disorganization in how the ransomware is actually unfolding.
Oh, okay, it's interesting. That's kind of the first perspective I've heard on that, but I know that it's been a bit, or it's been a big uptick in activity on both sides, unfortunately, of the cyber kind of battlefield. I was reading earlier this week that 2021 was the most active, whatever you want to call it, the worst year for cybercrime to date so far. It kind of makes sense as the internet continues to expand and the usage continues to expand, but I think the pandemic, like you said, probably perpetuated a lot of these problems based on, decentralized workforces, like we all kind of know about. Um, do you see the trend getting better or worse for a while going into 2022 as far as the amount of kind of cybercrime out there?
I think in 2022 we're definitely going to see more on the onstart. I think we're going to see more in the APT activity, the state-sponsored APT sort of activity that we've been seeing.
Hmm.
Not quite sure what's going to happen in that ransomware world. Like I've been saying, it's getting very disorganized. The groups don't seem to have the level of skill they used to have, and the ransomware as a service is making it very easy for just about anybody to get involved in that game.
Hmm.
So it's really going to come down to whether companies can really put the cyber programs in place to block a lot of the what we call the low level noise, and then concentrate on the bigger vulnerabilities that the APT actors are exploiting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with with your role in incident response, you're talking about, how the groups kind of can be less organized now. Do you feel like when you're, I don't know, don't want to get into any details here, but like in the response side of things, when you're trying to, figure out what happened, obviously probably working with authorities like police in some way, in some instances, or you see this on the news, do you find that maybe the groups being more disorganized helps the response find them and kind of recoup any losses sometimes? Because I've seen a lot of news about that, like, stolen funds or whatever being able to get retrieved by the FBI and stuff like that. Do you think that might be because of the disorganization you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And you're seeing an awful lot in the news lately about ransomware uh, group servers going down, and they're being tracked a lot easier now. And there's a lot of ransomware attacks that are just not successful.
Yeah,
Right. So
fair enough. Yeah, and so that maybe that's a bit of a one up for the good guys, kind of the response to the onslaught of attacks. We're getting some solid punches back in there for the good guys, which is good to see. Um, you wanted to talk a little bit about, and I wanted to hear your perspective on kind of what you thought the root causes were for a lot of these big attacks, because there was a bunch of big attacks in 2021 that were very newsworthy, right? Like that everyone knows about. We've chatted about all year long. What do you think were kind of some of these underlying trends in the root causes that you saw?
right, and I alluded to it before about the low level noise, right? And low level noise is like I say, these disorganized ransomware actors that are out there, and basically I don't have a number, but in many of the cases, the root cause came down to the fact that they just didn't have the mitigations in place to stop this from happening. A good cyber program with endpoint protection, a secure email gateway, alerting, detection, logging. So all of those things really contributed to the spread of the ransomware, definitely in 2021. So when it comes down to the APT actors and the higher level vulnerabilities I was talking about, I mean, that comes from a more mature cyber program, somebody who actually is now employing vulnerability scanning and pen testing and moving through the maturity of their cycle.
Right. And do you feel, maybe you said your company's been around for like 4 years, like from 4 years ago until now, is there any difference in the kind of the vibe or the reception you get when you come in? Like you said, you parachute into a scenario or a company and you want to, make moves and do set policies or do whatever you do. Is there any difference in kind of reception to that based on like the cybersecurity kind of awareness that should be out there now that it's even like cyber attacks are way more prevalent?
So I think what I find now versus 4 years ago is that companies are definitely paying a lot more attention to cyber awareness.
Right.
So 4 years ago, we'd find a lot of companies that just didn't have any protections in place and had no policies, no procedures, very lax practices. Today, when I go into companies, I find they have the basics, but they're not really part of a well-oiled program, and they're not tested, and there's not a lot of logging going on. So I think what's happening is that companies right now are kind of overwhelmed, and they're not sure what all the pieces are and how the pieces interplay together.
Right. And I guess what advice would you give for company X? Their medium-sized organization in Canada, which can be a fairly big company if you look at it like on a local level. Because there always seems to be, and we're Plurilock's a vendor. We do we help with incident response and detection and stuff like that. There seems like there's like a myriad of like tools that if you were a cyber, if you're a new like IT manager and you're like, we're going to develop a cyber program, we could just endlessly go on and get more and more and more tools. What would be kind of like a status quo that you think that everyone should kind of start with, which will cover most of the bases and then kind of add on from there as you see fit?
So I think every company should have access to a incident response or a forensics professional in some manner. And I'm not just trying to sell my services with that statement, but
Right.
what the statement is all about is I don't necessarily mind what tools you have, but you need somebody to review them to make sure they're effective. If you're going to have an incident and then you're going to call me or one of my colleagues in to help you, we have to make sure that the data we're looking for was captured,
Yeah. Yeah. So like
right?
sometimes I've heard from other people, like they don't even know what they've lost because they don't know where it is or where it's residing. right?
Yeah, exactly. So just because you turn a log on doesn't mean it's capturing what we need it to capture. Same thing with the firewall, with your Active Directory, with your endpoint. So you really do need to have a review of an incident response cyber forensics professional. Say, okay, you've got the right things in place, and cybersecurity is, I mentioned it before, about maturity. I'm not asking any company overnight to spend $2 million and come up to an advanced capability, but we're saying you have to have a roadmap and a plan and make sure it's effective along the way.
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard from other people saying it's just like an exit for most, probably for most companies out there now. IT and your internet functionality is like an existential part of your business, so it needs to be practiced and stuff like that. And having someone whose like whole job is to look at it is fairly like that should be common. So, yeah, that's great advice, James, and I think anyone listening to this will hopefully take it to heart. And I think more companies are, and I think we're going to get, the business community is going to get more and more aware of it, as unfortunately the more and more people get picked off and attacks happen. But if you had one Christmas wish for cyber going into 2022, what would you like to see happen as far as preparation and kind of cybersecurity hygiene?
I would just like to see companies employ the sound fundamentals. Right? Sound fundamentals is where it all starts, and making sure that we have good cyber awareness training. We have good policies and procedures and practices. We're managing our passwords properly. Many of the business email compromises are happening with credential compromises, and that really, I mean, a lot of them are very avoidable if they have a few key things like multi-factor authentication in place. And it's with most companies now moving to cloud services. I mean, cloud services are great, especially when coupled with multi-factor authentication. But what you now have is you have an awful lot of logs that are happening with the cloud authentications and the different authentication mechanisms. So it makes it very difficult for companies to keep track of who's logging in from where and how they're logging in. For example, when you look at a standard cloud service, there's a number of default authentication measures that somebody could connect to that cloud service. Most companies don't take a step back and say, well, which one are we actually going to approve and which one are we going to use? And why don't we deactivate the other 12?
Yeah, fair enough. So your wish is basic, basic kind of the cybersecurity hygiene practices, which is a good wish. Do you had anything got it? Do you personally have anything exciting going on during the holidays or any big plans?
I don't. I like I was mentioning to you before, we're so busy that this 15 minutes with you today is a nice little break. We are booked. We have clients all over the world, in Holland, all over the United States, coast to coast in Canada. So in a normal year, I spend about 200 days on the road.
Wow, that's a lot of days. So, well, thanks for your service in doing all this. And if people want to get in touch with your services, what is the best way to do that?
You can just visit our website, mi613.ca. There's lots of information and contact on there, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yep, right here on LinkedIn. He'll be tagged in this post. I know you're a busy man, James, and you got to run, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Officially a friend of Plurilock now. And yeah, everyone, thank you for watching the 12 Days of Cyber Christmas. I forget which day we're on. I think this is day 7 or 6. It's the holidays. It's all getting mashed together. Anyways, James, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.